All right, welcome back, guys. In the last video, we saw how we could generate a Braintree token and then use that to display that drop-in UI on our front end. Now in this video, we're going to start putting together that process payment view, where the first thing we're going to do is create that customer. So we're going to both create a customer inside of our application in the database and also inside of Braintree. So because we're going to have a customer inside of a model, which is going to be in our application, I have to create that model. So I'm going to open up my payment models.py and I'm going to start putting this together. So I'm going to remove this comment, and then I'm going to make a new class, which I'm going to call customer. I'm going to bring in models.model. So this is going to be my customer model, and then it needs a first name, which is going to be a models.character field with a max length of 255. I'm going to copy down a line. So my next one is going to be an email, and this is going to be an email field. So an email field is just a character field that has some validation to ensure that it is an email. And then I also want this to be unique. So I'm going to set unique to be true. And then I'm going to copy this first name and then paste down here. And this last one's going to be for my customer ID, which is going to be a character field of max length 255. And I also want this to be unique as well. So I'm going to set unique to be true. And then finally, I'm going to define the string representation of this model. And then it's going to return self.email. Because it's going to be a unique value, and it's also going to be a character because this email field is a character field, and this is required to be a string. So now that we have the model, let's go make the migrations. So I'm going to navigate into my backend. I'm going to activate my virtual environment. I'm going to ensure that my database is running. In my case, it is. So I'm going to do a Python manage.py make migrations. So that's going to create my customer model, and now I need to migrate this to my PostgreSQL database. So I'm going to do a Python manage.py migrate. So now that I have that, another thing I want to do is I want to open up my admin.py and just register this so that I can see it inside of my admin panel. So I'm going to do an admin.site.register, and then I'm going to register this customer model. So I'm going to bring that in. So from .models, I'm going to import customer, and then I'm going to just bring that inside of here. So that way I can have access to it in my admin panel. And then I also need to make sure that I have a super user so I can even access the admin panel. So I'm going to do a Python manage.py create super user. And then my username is going to be admin. And then for the email address, I'll do something like Bryan@minishop.com. And then I'll set my password. I have to enter it again, it seems. So there we go. My super user is created. So I'm going to clear this up. I'm going to run my server. And I'm just going to have that running in the background. So now the next thing I want to do is open up my views.py and start putting together this process payment view. So right down here, I'm going to define a new class-based view. So I'm going to do class process payment view, pass in my API view. This is going to be a post request where I have self and request. Then inside of here, I'm going to wrap everything in a try except in case if something goes wrong. And I'm just going to copy this and put it in here, just because this is going to be very similar, except the message is going to be different. So the message I'm going to have is just something went wrong when processing payment. I think that's something that makes sense. And now let's start building out the logic for this. So first I want to retrieve some data from request.data. So this is going to be that form data that we submit, which is going to be JSON data. And I want to extract that. So that's that first name, email, and then all those address details, as well as the nonce token. So I'm going to grab the first name. So I'm going to have a variable that I store this in. It's going to come from data first name. And I'm going to copy this down a line with Shift Option down key. The next one's going to be the email. And then another thing I want to do is also ensure that this email is in all lowercase. So I'm also going to do email is email.lower. This is going to make it in lowercase. And then I also want to make sure that this is a string just in case so that this doesn't go wrong. Then I'm going to have the street address, which is going to come from data street address. Then I'm going to have the city, country, state, province, postal code, and finally that nonce. So I'm just going to have all these right here ready to go. So I'm going to change this one to be city. This one's going to be the country. This one's going to be the state province. Then I'm going to have the postal zip code. And then finally, I'm going to have my nonce token. So now these are all the values that I need inside of here. So the next thing I want to do is check if country is equal to Canada. So it's going to be that value that's passed over. Then I'm going to have a variable called country name, which I set equal to Canada. And then I'm also going to have a country code, which I set equal to CA. Otherwise, if it's not Canada, then it's United States. So instead, I'm going to do country name is equal to United States. Then I'm going to have the country code, which is going to be equal to US. And then the next thing I'm going to have is my total amount. And then this is going to be a string, which is 47.99. So when I was doing the overview for the application, this is something we saw. So this is just going to be the price that I set for these headphones. So whenever someone goes ahead and submits the payment, this is what we're going to use for the total. And we're also going to display on that checkout page that this is in fact what the user is going to get charged. The next thing I want to do is check if we have this customer in our database with this email that's being passed. So I also want to make sure I bring in my customer model. So I'm going to do from .models, I'm going to import my customer model. Then back down here, I'm going to check if customer.objects.filter, where email is equal to email, .exists. So if it exists, then I'm going to retrieve it, and I'm going to retrieve that customer ID. Otherwise, I'm going to go and create it. So first I'm going to deal with this case here in the if. So I'm going to do customer is customer.objects.get, where email is equal to email. This way I have a single object instance of this customer by using this get instead of having a list. And this is also going to work because these emails are unique. And then I'm going to grab the customer ID. So that's going to be customer ID, the variable that I store this in. And it's going to come from customer.customer ID. And then I'm also just going to wrap this in a string function just to ensure that it is a string. And then the next thing I want to do is I want to ensure that this customer exists in Braintree. So oftentimes with Braintree, you're going to have an isSuccess attribute with your response. So you can check whether that's true, and that means it's successful. But in the case where we're finding if we have a customer with this ID, this actually doesn't happen. The main way that we know it's successful is if it actually works. So it's kind of strange, but we're going to have a try except. And then in this try part, I'm going to have result is equal to gateway.customer.find, and then pass in customer ID. So if this works, then that means we have this customer in Braintree. And actually, I don't need this result, so I can actually get rid of that. And then in this except part, if we don't find the customer, if this happens to go wrong, then what we're going to do is result is gateway.customer.create. So we're going to create it because it doesn't exist. So for whatever reason, in this case, we have the customer in our database, but it got deleted in Braintree. So this is possible. You can go into Braintree, you can delete a customer, and then this customer can still exist in our database. So this right here is going to handle that edge case for us. And then to create this customer, I'm going to pass a first name, and then we have access to that, and then also an email, which I also have access to. And then we're going to check if this right here is successful. So I'm going to check with if result.isSuccess. So if this flag is true, then I'm going to do customer ID is result.customer.id. So we're going to grab the ID of this newly created customer. And then I also want to ensure that this is a string, so I'm just going to wrap this in the string function. And then I'm going to do customer.objects.filter, where email is equal to email. And then we're going to update this customer that's stored in our database. So I'm going to do a .update, and I'm going to update just the customer ID to be our new customer ID. And then I'm going to do customer is equal to customer. If I could spell customer. So customer.objects.get, where email is equal to email. So we're just going to have a reference to this so that we can use it later. And then I'm also going to have an else, where if this, for whatever reason, isn't successful, so maybe the Braintree account got deleted or something, or perhaps the public private key merchant ID got tampered with, who knows what happens, but maybe this doesn't work. So in this case, I'm going to return a response that's going to have an error that says customer information invalid. Then we're going to have a status of status.htp 400 bad request. Now let's handle this else part. So in the else case, this means that we don't have this customer in our database, which means we never created this. So in this case, I'm going to do a result is equal to gateway.customer.create. Then we're going to create this customer just like we did here with the first name and email. So I'm just going to pass these values into here. And then I'm going to check, was this successful? So if result.isSuccess, then in that case, we're going to grab the customer ID from result.customer.id. Then I want to ensure that this is a string, so I'm just going to wrap this in the string function. And then I'm going to do a customer.objects.create. And then to create this customer, we need to pass the first name, email, customer ID. So we're going to pass all these values. So I'm going to have first name, which is first name, and then email, which is email, and then the customer ID, which is equal to customer ID. So now we can create this. And then I also want to have an instance of this. So I'm going to do customer is equal to this. And then I'm also going to have an else case just in case if anything goes wrong. And then in that case, I'm going to return an error response. I'm going to return a response with an error that just says failed to create customer. We'll have a status of status.http 400 bad request. So there we are. This is so far our logic for this. And then finally, if everything ends up being okay with all of this, I'm just going to return a response, which I'm going to change later on. But for now, I'm just going to have it be something like success created customer successfully. And then this is just going to be a status of status.http 201 created. So this is what I'm going to have for now. Later on, it's going to be more like the transaction was successful because that's what we're actually doing. But this is the first step in this whole process payment view. So this is what we got so far. So now with that, let's go back to our front end. And then I also want to run my front end and just have it running in the background. So I'm going to do, first of all, I need to go into my front end folder, do an npm run start. So that's going to start up my front end, and I'll probably get jumped right here. There we go. So that's now running my localhost 3000. So I'm going to go back into here. I'm going to open up my source, containers, checkout. And then right now I need to put this buy function together because this right here is going to have that logic for me to actually hit that process payment view. And then actually before I start working on this, another thing I need to do is actually go into my urls.py and then create an endpoint that's going to utilize this process payment view. So I'm just going to do that before going into my checkout page. So I'm going to bring in my process payment view. I'm going to copy this down a line. And then this is going to be process-payment. It's going to utilize this process payment view. We're going to do a .as view since it's a class-based view. So when we hit this with a post request, which is going to be API/payment/process-payment, then that's going to go ahead, utilize our process payment view where we pass in all of this data. And then for now, all it's going to do for us is create our customer. So let's now jump back to our checkout.js and start putting this buy function together. So inside of this buy function, I'm going to have an asynchronous request because I'm going to hit that process payment view, or I guess more that process payment endpoint. So I'm going to put an async here. And then I'm also going to check if all those different form fields aren't empty, just to be safe. So I'm going to check if first name doesn't equal an empty string, and then email doesn't equal an empty string. And then same thing for the street address, city, country, state, province, and then the postal zip code. So we're going to do this one, which is our street address, then our city, country, state, province, and then finally our postal zip code. And then I just want to get rid of this final and here. And then I'm going to have my set of curly braces. So if all of this passes, then we're going to continue on. So I'm going to have some configuration where I'm going to have my headers, where I'm going to have my accept header, which is going to be application/JSON. Then I'm also going to have a content type because I have to submit all these different form fields as JSON data along with my nonce token as well. And then below this config, I'm going to extract my nonce. So my nonce is going to come from data.instance.requestPaymentMethod. And then I have to have an await keyword in front of here. And then I'm also going to extract that nonce from here. So this right here is going to be an object where then I can do let nonce. So I'm going to destructure that nonce from this right here. And then I'm going to pass it along with all this data as well. And then I'm also going to have set processing order be true because now we're processing the order. So I want to show that spinner on that place order button. Then I'm going to have my try catch because here's where I'm going to make that API request. And then what I want to do is const response is await axios.post http localhost 8000 /API /payment /process -payment. So that's our endpoint. And then I'm going to pass a body. So I need to define this body. I'm going to do that, say, right below here. So const body is going to be json.stringify. And I'm going to stringify all of these values. So to make this easier, I have all these values right here, destructured from the form data. So I'm just going to copy them from here and then just place it inside of here and fix up this indenting. So that way it's going to make this a little bit easier. And then another thing I also have to JSON stringify is my nonce token. So that's another thing I'm going to add in here along with all this other data. And then also on top of my body, I want to pass my config. And then I want to check, was this successful? So if response.status is 201, then we know that this was successful because inside of my view, that's what I determined as successful right here. Status is 201 created. And then I'm also going to just have one line here if it's successful. So I'm not going to have the curly braces, and I'm just going to do set success to be true. So now when this is set to true, then we're going to hit this, which is going to redirect us to the thank you page. And then after this catch, I'm just going to do a set processing order to be false. So there we are. This way, if anything ends up actually going wrong, then we're not going to see that loader, and instead we're going to see that place order button, and then we're going to see some kind of error. So now let's go ahead and test this out and make sure that it works. So I'm going to go back into here, go into my checkout. I'm going to fill out these details. So right now, I don't have any customer inside my vault. I made sure to clear this. So if I search right now, there are no customers found, and there's nothing in my database because I literally just created that model. So now let me do John here. I'm going to have John Doe. Going to have some address. So currently these values won't do anything inside of my endpoint, but later on they will. The only thing that's really going to be utilized is this first name and email, and that's going to create my customer. So I'm going to pass some dummy city, this right here. And then let's put in a payment method. So I can also use a card like this. This also works. And then let's place this order. And there we go, we're redirected to the thank you page, which means that we got a 201 created. Now let's make sure that everything worked. So I'm going to go to localhost 8000 /admin/. I'm going to log in with my admin account I made. And then we're going to check, was this customer created? There they are. Here's the customer. We have the first name John, email, and we also see a customer ID. So we should have a customer with this ID in Braintree as well. So I'm going to search this vault again. So I'm going to go to the vault, click on search. And there we are. We have a customer created with this ID. And that matches with what we have right in here. And then we can see their first name, and we can see their email, and when they were created, and all that. So currently there's no payment methods or addresses. We're going to get to that. But this is everything I wanted to cover in this video. So we're going to put a little pause here. And then in the next video, we're going to start putting together our logic for the addresses. So I'll see you guys in the next video.